I'm Anthony Walsh with Next Year's Jets, and today we're going to go over the Jets' draft choices in the upcoming 2026 NFL Draft. They have two of them. What are they going to do with them? Should they take a quarterback? Should they not take a quarterback? Let's dive in. So right now, the Jets hold the 7th and the 23rd picks in the NFL Draft, one of which from the Sauce Gardner trade, one of which is their original pick. They still have teams such as the Dolphins and Saints on their schedule, so they could win a couple more games and bring that 7th pick down further. They have a total of 5 first-round picks over the upcoming draft and the 2027 draft, so they have some room to work with here. If they decide not to take a quarterback, I know that's not ideal. I know there's a lot of Jets fans out there, including myself, who are very impatient and want a quarterback now, but if there's a situation in which, hey, the Jets are maybe even out of the top 10, because as I mentioned, they have some easier teams on their schedule that they could potentially beat, okay, you have picks in the future that you can maybe get a quarterback in the 2027 draft. So the odds that they take that actually quarterback this year, despite the names of Fernando Mendoza, Ty Simpson, Dante Moore, the odds of that happening, especially if they win more games, are pretty slim. Now, if they go and lose the rest of their games, okay, maybe they dip back into the top 5 and anything could happen. But the way we're going to go about this episode is assuming that the Jets aren't going to trade away a bunch of their draft picks for a Fernando Mendoza or for a Ty Simpson or Dante Moore, just because those guys aren't that highly regarded where you're necessarily going to give away a ton of your draft picks. So who are the Jets going to draft? Well, I usually go by Tankathon. Tankathon is a site you know if you're a Jets fan. You probably check it a lot more than you actually watch the games, simply because the Jets haven't been very good in a long time, and Tankathon tells you where your team is in the draft. And Tankathon has a mock draft, and they have the Jets selecting wide receiver Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State at that 7th pick. And he's widely regarded as the best wide receiver in the draft. Draft guru Mel Kiper Jr., I'm sure everybody's heard of Mel Kiper Jr., but if you haven't, he's been on ESPN for like 40-something years, and he's by far widely regarded as the best draft guru, at least the most entertaining. And he has Jordan Tyson ranked number 1 on his draft board of wide receivers. So take that at face value. But we do know that the Jets need wide receivers. I talked previously about A.D. Mitchell and John Mechie in previous episodes of the podcast and how much I think that they could be contributors to this offense. Despite that, Garrett Wilson does need a solid number 2 on his team. He needs someone that's also a threat for a quarterback to throw the ball, because the way it is right now, and especially before they got Mechie and A.D. Mitchell, Garrett Wilson was the only person on that field that was going to catch the football. Allen Lazard's not catching the football. You can make a case Mason Taylor has developed nicely and is somewhat of a threat at tight end, but still, Garrett Wilson is the only premier Pro Bowl All-Pro threat on that field to get a pass, and that can't stay the way it is. That has to change, and maybe Jordan Tyson is that answer. As I mentioned, he's out of Arizona State. He has 61 receptions this season, 711 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So pretty solid numbers. The flip side to that, though, is that he has had some injury concerns. He hurt his hamstring earlier this year. He left the game on November 28th as well with an injury that his head coach described as something lingering, but wouldn't go into more detail. Now, let's be real here. These head coaches know that these guys are going into the NFL draft. They know that there's a lot of teams looking at them, and they like these guys. They like these kids in a lot of cases, and they don't want to destroy their value. So the term something lingering concerns me, because he didn't say what it was. If it was something that wasn't a big deal, if it was nothing chronic, I have a feeling he probably would say what it is, and he didn't. So I don't want to make it sound like Jordan Tyson's injury prone or anything like that. Who knows? Maybe he'll go on to have a long NFL career and won't get injured at all. But for what we have to work off of, it is a concern. Doesn't mean you don't select them. As I mentioned, Mel Kiper Jr. has him at the top of his board for wide receivers. He's not the only one. I'm not just going by him. There's numerous ESPN analysts, NFL Network analysts that have him as the best wide receiver in the draft. And at the 7th pick, if we're anywhere near that range in the draft, you're going to want to go after a guy that people have highly regarded. So unless you're going to go for a totally crazy pick out of nowhere, and knowing the Jets, that usually hasn't worked out. So we'll see how it goes, but Jordan Tyson would be somebody to look at, and Tankathon has him on their board. I know personally, if you want my take, Jordan Tyson is a very good player in college. He is. If you're a watcher of college football, you know the name. And the Jets, as I mentioned, desperately need wide receiver help. If you're going to bring in a quarterback, maybe you're taking a chance on a guy in the 2nd round this year. You got a 2nd round pick from the Quinnen Williams trade. If you wait till next season, like I mentioned, you're going to need weapons for a quarterback to work with. You can't come into another season where The quarterback has absolutely nothing to work with. They have Breece Hall, sure, at running back, and Garrett Wilson at receiver, but nothing else. I don't care who it is. It could be the next Patrick Mahomes. It could be the next Tom Brady. They're not going to have success with the Jets at that point. And we've seen this numerous times with the Jets in the past. I mean, how many times does Sam Darnold get thrown out there with Jamison Crowder as his number one receiver, and he didn't play well? Well, shocker, he didn't play well. And look at what Sam Darnold's done the past few years. He's not the best quarterback in the NFL, but he's a solid quarterback, and he's paved a solid career for himself. And I just think that you cannot do this again to a quarterback. I mean, we saw it again after that with Zach Wilson. How many times are we going to throw a quarterback out there with nothing to work with, and say he's the answer and don't draft well around him? So maybe we should change that process and say, hey, draft well before we get the quarterback, bring the quarterback in, maybe have him sit behind a veteran for a while, and then bring that quarterback into a better situation. And I just feel like that would be better for all parties. I don't think that the Jets would fail in that regard if they take it slow and they give some weapons for a quarterback to work with. With that 23rd pick, though, that the Jets got from the Colts, Tankathon has the Jets selecting cornerback Avion Terrell out of Clemson. Now, you might be saying, if you're not a huge Jets fan and you're just checking out this podcast, well, why are the Jets selecting a corner? Well, the Jets' corner position has diminished very quickly over the past season, just in general. If you were to look at the corner position a year back in 2024 in December and say, oh, well, you'd say actually the corner position is actually a solid spot for the Jets, where you have DJ Reed, you have Sauce Gardner, and they were a fairly locked down group. They were one of the best corner duos in the NFL. Well, DJ Reed left in free agency. Sauce Gardner left with the trade that happened just a few weeks ago. And now all of a sudden you're stuck with hardly anything to watch at the corner position. And maybe, just maybe, this kid could be the difference maker. I go back to the rankings on the list of the draft experts, so to speak. And again, Mel Kiper, I'll mention him again. He's ranked third on Mel Kiper's list of cornerbacks for the draft. And he's consistently in the top 5 of most analyst cornerbacks rankings. And, if you think about it, the Jets haven't had a ton of lockdown corners in their history. You have Darrelle Revis. Sauce for a period was a lockdown corner. But, you go through the years, there's not a ton of guys where you could say the Jets, they've really succeeded in selecting this corner. And I think that goes back to part of the reason and a lot of reasons for why they haven't been good. You need talent on both sides of the ball. And there's so many cases throughout the Jets history where one side of the ball does not match the other side of the ball. I could think back to 2009, 2010. The Jets had a lockdown defense for both of those years. Offense wasn't bad. They had some good wide receivers, but they didn't have two sides of the ball that were both functioning on the same plane. They always have either one better than the other. Usually it's the defense better than the offense. You want to go back even further to the 1980s? The sack exchange. How great was that offense for the sack exchange? It wasn't great. And it's part of the reason that they didn't make a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl with that team. And how does that factor into here? Well, the Jets had a really good defensive group not that long ago. And what did they make of it? Nothing, because they decided to go after a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, and it didn't work out. Then they decided to take their chances with Zach Wilson after Rodgers got hurt. Didn't work out. So one side of your game could be great, doesn't really matter. You need to shore it up, and you need to make sure that you're getting young talent in here that could produce and that could stay with the team. We thought Sauce Gardner would be that guy. He's not. So maybe, just maybe, this guy is the difference maker for the Jets at the corner position. Big picture, though, I've given you the Tankathon picks for who they think they should select, and I said I like Tankathon as a site, but really, what do they know in mock drafts? I'm not sure. What do I think the Jets should do? It's a tough question. It really is a tough question, and I think it's also going to come down to looking at how the season ends for a lot of these guys. I mean, Fernando Mendoza's season is not over. These quarterback seasons aren't over. If Fernando Mendoza goes on to have a great rest of the season, and if they make the college playoffs and he plays well, maybe you reconsider. Maybe you do give up some picks to get back up into the front end of the draft. I mean, think about how the Jets got Sam Darnold. The Jets didn't get Sam Darnold through sheer losing. The Jets got Sam Darnold through a trade, and they gave up a lot of pieces for Sam Darnold. And it didn't work out necessarily, but he's a good talent, and maybe it could have worked out if, like I said, they built around him. So we'll see how it goes. But bottom line, the Jets need to have a different approach in their draft selections. You can't be the same old, we're getting the savior mentality. That doesn't work. The teams that actually produced actual talent in the NFL and they draft well in the NFL don't revolve around, I'm going to pick this quarterback and he's going to be my answer. Go through the great quarterbacks in the league. Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes was not a high selection in the draft for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was a needle in a haystack. And the Kansas City Chiefs built a team around him that turned out to be a great dynasty team. And Mahomes obviously is a great quarterback in his own right. But if you threw Patrick Mahomes into the Jets back in 2017, 2018 when he was drafted, he would have stunk. He would have stunk because you need talent around a guy. Go to Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is a perfect example. Say you hit on the next quarterback and Fernando Mendoza is the next Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow doesn't have anything around him. Joe Burrow gets hurt every 5 minutes, and when he's on the field, he plays well, but what does it really matter when the team's winning 5 games? So that's my overall point is I could see the Jets falling into the trap of, hey, you know what? Fernando Mendoza is playing really well. We like this kid's demeanor. We like this kid's talent. And just goes back to, hey, take him. He's the savior of our team. Well, what are you going to do with that? And the Jets have an opportunity here to really change this franchise. It's not the first opportunity to change this franchise either. If you're a diehard fan like myself, you know that John Idzik, who's a name you don't want to hear, former Jets general manager, had a number of picks in the early 2010s to change this team. What did he do with it? He got a bunch of guys that you've never heard of. I'm not even going to go over the names because it would bore you. You wouldn't know the names. That's how bad it was. You could have a number of draft picks and still fail. The Jets have shown that a number of times. Cleveland Browns have shown that a number of times. This is a pivotal opportunity in Jets history. Are they going to go the same direction that they've been going on for 30, 40 years now? In large part, despite some short periods of success? Or are they going to pivot and say, hey, you know what? This is the Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji regime, and we're not going to be the same old Jets. Because I don't know about you, I'm sick of hearing the same old Jets mentality. It's part of the reason I created this podcast. So, yeah, that's where the Jets are with this mock draft. If you go deeper into the draft and talk about the second round, which would be a whole nother podcast I could go into, this is just first round talk, there's a whole lot of moves they can make there too. I mean, you have Quinnen Williams pick in the second round now where if things stay the same, it's an early second round pick. You could get first round level talent there. And maybe you even look at your offensive line. Elijah Vera Tucker has been anything but reliable. Maybe you try to shore up that offensive line just a little bit more for a young quarterback. And I know I'm sticking a lot towards the offense. I mentioned the defense a little bit with the corners and everything, but the Jets defense, the defensive line at least, is solid. It's not the greatest in the NFL, especially with Quinnen Williams leaving, but you have Will McDonald there. You have Jermaine Johnson there as edge rushers that have gotten after the quarterback. They've produced. They've done well. And so I wouldn't be one of these people that wants to see necessarily a defensive lineman choice for the Jets. I know there's been a thought process out there from some Jets fans, get some of these really good edge rushers, get some of these defensive linemen because the Jets haven't had a great pass rush attack in a minute now. But big picture, the Jets have so many areas of need. You could go to safety. You could go corner, as I've already mentioned. You could go virtually any spot in the offense besides running back, and it would be a fair choice because of how bad things have been for this Jets team. So we'll see. It's yet another year where the biggest event for the Jets is the NFL draft. So we'll dive into it more in future episodes. But again, this is the moment where Darren Muji makes or breaks his tenure as Jets GM. Free agency was great. He had some solid signings there. Trade deadline was obviously huge smash for Darren Muji. The Jets were in the headlines a ton. I'm sure Woody Johnson likes that, but that's a whole other discussion that he loves the headlines, but doesn't really care so much about winning. Anyway, but the whole point, the reason that they were in the headlines is because they got this draft capital. So I know this wasn't the podcast of here's the Jets' next franchise quarterback. Maybe I should have titled it that because it would get clicks. But I'm not after the clicks. I'm after logic. And logic states right now that the Jets could potentially win some more games, bring that draft choice down further. We went over the tank versus non-tank argument in the previous episode. If you want to listen to that, get into that. You'll hear my take on that. But regardless of how you feel about the tank, pro-tank, anti-tank, the players aren't going to tank. The coaches aren't going to tank. And you have some opportunities to beat the Saints, to beat the Miami Dolphins. And if you do that, all of a sudden, you're probably not in a top 10 spot. And if you are, you're probably right around 10. And if that happens, we're already in a quarterback-less draft, if you want to call it that. And if you're going to get a Fernando Mendoza, or if you're going to get Dante Moore or one of those guys, you're going to have to reach for them, or you're going to have to trade a lot for them. And I don't think the Jets should be in the business of doing that. The Jets have done that numerous times throughout their history, where they think they're smarter than everybody else, and they draft guys at positions they shouldn't be drafted in and trade where they shouldn't trade just to get the big name. I don't think the Jets should be in the business of doing that. This isn't the draft of, I know Arch Manning might be in the draft another year or two. I know he hasn't played that very well, but he's a big name. Maybe he's the guy you go after. This isn't the draft where you have a ton of quarterback prospects to have a lot of hype behind them. So we shall see. Thank you for listening to next year's Jets. Keep an eye out for future episodes, and let me know, what do you think the Jets should do in the draft? It's going to be a good one.